Hey, welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Hour. I'm your host, Rob Lupo from Lupo Outdoors. Today is going to be an interesting podcast. Um, I got a lot of notes, and we're going to talk about wind. So, as many of you know who follow the channel and the podcast here, um, we're trying to shoot out to a mile. Now, I've talked to a lot of people, oh, a mile's no big deal. Well, I come from a shotgun background where, 100 yards is a lot. Um, Last year, we went out to 1,219 yards, and that was really, really cool. Had a great time with that. Very much enjoyed the fact that we were able to go that far out. Um, what I found to be really interesting is wind is always the biggest factor. Now, we were looking at many of the different things that really captured our eye. There's lots of tools out there. There's ballistics tools. There's a lot of different functionalities that you can do to help you cheat your way out there to a mile. There's a show that's on YouTube. It's an older one. It's a couple years old now, and it's King of 2 Mile, where they go out there with the rifles and they start at shorter distances and they work their way out to 2 miles. Now, shooting at 2 miles, that's a tremendous distance to lob a projectile accurately to nail a target. I mean, lobbing it out there isn't the hard part. Lobbing it so it actually hits a target, that's the hard part. I've watched numerous videos where they've talked about, going out and nailing long distance targets. And I watched this one where they're using a specific caliber and they're trying to hit a mile and on a specific target. And it wasn't really a tiny target, it was kind of a larger target. But the fact though of that thing is when they finally no wait, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. This was the world record shot, something like 3 or 4 miles. And it took them 86 shots before they nailed the target. So today we're going to talk wind. Yes. The ideal process would be to try to shoot a mile with absolutely zero wind between me and that target and have zero wind. That would be ideal. But that's not practical and that's not how this works. So I'm going to talk a bit about understanding wind reading. All right. So let's start here in segment one. We're going to understand the wind reading. I'd like to welcome you to this podcast. This might be a multi-part podcast because wind is complex. We have our Kestrel. Now, Kestrel, I just want to point out, was kind enough to send us, and if you watched last week's podcast, we talked about it and showed the Kestrel. They sent us their brand new Kestrel X Elite 5700, which has the faster computer. They sent us the hub, which connects to the rifle, just so we can see what the wind readings are live. They sent us the tripod, the weather vane, everything. This is the weather vane. And so here's the weather vane pouch. Here's the Kestrel itself. And they're very easy to use. You just kind of pop it open. It's got all the measurements in there, biometric, everything is in there. Ironically, if you hold it like this, you actually are covering up the two ports back here. But this is great. And then when you put it on the weather vane, and they send us the tripod, it moves based on the wind, gives you the wind speed and the direction. Fantastic device. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit, as long as I drop it everywhere I go, which I apparently seem to be doing here. So let's start with the basics, right? Wind reading isn't just about, feeling the breeze. It's about understanding how the wind affects the flight of the bullet over long distances. Now, when I was shooting shotgun, my clay targets are a bit out there, but wind was the biggest problem when shooting clays. I remember I was in a competition and we're doing skeet. Now, of all the competitions, I feel that trap was the easiest to work with. Skeet was the second hardest, and sporting clays is the hardest. And the sporting clays are the most difficult, predominantly because if you're going from one range to another, you don't know how they have everything, set up with their tilts, and are they coming overhead or coming from the sides? Are they going up and then coming back down? Do we have rabbits running by? It's a whole different game. But I remember in one of my competitions, I was coming up and I was just about to track and fire upon the clay when the wind hit it and the clay dropped down 2 feet at the same rate, just poof. And I nailed it. And I remember everybody commenting, that was really great tracking. We could tell you were ready to pull the trigger, and then it dropped. And then just as it dropped, it continued on its path. You nailed it. So I have experience with wind to a degree. The farther you're shooting, the more impact the wind has. So at very short distances, if I'm shooting a large caliber rifle at a target 50 to 100 yards, wind will have little impact on the bullet. It will still change it. If I'm going for points, it's impeccable that I understand the wind because I want to make sure I get all the points I can. And the farther you go out, the slower the bullet's traveling. And you have wind coming from one direction to the other direction to the other direction to the other direction as the bullet's traveling farther and farther out there. So every sequence of wind changes where that bullet's going. So think about that. Every level of wind, because a lot of people think of wind when it comes to ballistics, especially archery. Oh my God, when I was doing archery, wind was a huge deal because arrows are light and wind likes to grab them and move them in farther directions than where I'm trying to shoot them at. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. That being said, I did learn a lot about wind with my shotguns. That when I'm shooting a larger caliber, as it slows down, it is more affected by the wind. Now, we have everything. We have the, full metal jackets. We have the aluminum, the A tips, which is the aluminum tips. We have the plastic tips, the ELD match, boat tails, all this helps, right? The coefficient of the bullet itself and how it reacts with wind makes a difference. I was talking to a buddy of mine who is building a long range shooting range here in Florida, up in Jacksonville. Um, Believe me, building anything here in Florida, it can be a challenge. But he's going to have a long range shooting school up in Jacksonville, Florida. I'll get him on the podcast and we'll talk about it in more detail. But he told me, even a 6.5 Creedmoor will go out to a mile. And I'm looking to use either a 6.5 PRC, 300 PRC, or a 338 Lapua Magnum. Excuse me. One of the key factors involved with that is that the more, the heavier and more ballistically accurate that bullet is. It's not that's even the correct phrasing. What am I trying to say here? That bigger bullet traveling at really fast, at a very fast rate, is going to have less effect than a very small bullet traveling at the same rate, right? The lighter the bullet, the easier it is to move. The heavier the bullet and the bigger the bullet, and the faster it's going to have less effect of the wind, if I understand it correctly. Remember, I'm shooting shot out of a shotgun the majority of my career here, and shot just likes to go everywhere. When we talk about shooting over a mile, even a slight wind can divert the shot significantly. Let's go back a little bit when we were talking about canting. So I have on my rifle the electronic, it's basically like an electronic bubble from MDT. And people haven't looked at that for rifle shooting. MDT has this wonderful electronic level where when it goes green, your rifle is dead on level. Some people just look at bubble levels. This one, I have the older version, so mine has the bubble level as part of the electronics. So if the batteries go out, I still have the bubble. If I'm slightly canted in that fire, it's going to change that bullet, that where that bullet lands. At 100 yards, probably not going to be significant. But 500, 800, 1,700 yards, it's going to be very significant. That's going to be the difference between hitting and missing. So let's start at the basics here. Wind reading isn't about feeling the breeze. It's about understanding how wind affects the flight of the bullet over long distances. And when we talk about shooting over a mile, that slight difference makes a difference, right? So we just covered that. I mean, first, it's important to recognize that wind doesn't just blow in a single direction. It's dynamic. It swirls, it shifts, it can be completely different at various points between you and the target. How many of us have seen dust devils where it all changes everything? right? To read the wind efficiently and effectively, shooters can often use wind flags, right? So one of the cool things about using the Kestrel, and I just added here, I know I said it someplace. Oh, it's right here. So one of the nice things about the Kestrel is I can pre-design specific like ribbon flags and mark them, right? And what's cool about that is I can put the Kestrel next to it, and when the wind blows, I can see, you need to be consistent with the length of that ribbon, right? I can see how much of that ribbon is lifted at the different miles per hour. So if at 1 mile per hour, I can see where the flakes limped, and then at 10 miles per hour, it's almost all the way out there. The Kestrel can help me identify that, and that's a really cool aspect of this tool. And then once I understand what I'm looking at and understanding the effect, it's like a windsock at the airport. The different levels tell you the different miles per hour of the wind plus the direction. Now, if I'm looking at 1,000 yards and I have these set up every 100 yards or so, I can judge visually what the wind is doing down the track there. Does it mean that I'm capable of grasping what that wind's going to do to my bullet? At the stage I'm at right now, not a chance. But what we're trying to do is get me to that stage where I can identify. I should be able to look at what the wind is doing, whether I have the flags there or not. I can watch the grass. I can watch how the mirages shimmer depending on the temperature. I can look at the branches in the trees. Everything that the wind affects should give me an indication of what's happening at that location. And then it's about calculating it in your book. Now, in the competitions, usually they're given a specific amount of time to shoot like 5 shots. So you don't have all the day, all the time in the world. We're not doing it that way. my quest is to hit a mile. So I don't care if it takes me 100 rounds, 200 rounds. I don't care if I have to wait 10 minutes between shots because I'm calculating everything out. That's what I'm doing. Because I'm not doing it for the competition. I'm doing it for my personal competition, my personal quest to nail a target a mile. And if we're successful, then we're going to go out to 2 miles. And with this one, we may attempt with all 3 primary calibers. My calibers that I'm looking at using are a 6.5 PRC, and I have 2 rifles that do that. I have the one where I did the 1219 shot, a Rob Zombie Slayer, and then I have one that I purchased, which is back here behind me, which is the Browning um, uh, Hell's Canyon, X Hell's Canyon long range. That's also in 6.5 PRC. Then I'm building a Hawa 1200 and 300 PRC. So that's going to be my budget rifle. And then I'm looking to use the brand new from Lupo, which we talked about at SHOT Show, which is their HPR, which we talked about in the last episode. That's going to be also in 300 PRC. And then I have my 2 338 Lapuas. I have my Barrett and I have my Christian Arms, which is a hunting rifle. So we're going to try the different ballistics. We're going to pick one of the rifles to actually attempt, but I'm actually going to probably try at least a few shots with each rifle uh, once we have a success. So that should be very, very interesting. Um, so we talked about wind flags. But these are specifically, most of these are designed specifically with the indicators that show wind direction and strength. Um, Observing the flags can give us a real time reading and behavior along the bullet's path. But how do we calculate that? I'm going to have to look at each flag, identify the wind speed and the direction, and then calculate how that's affecting my bullet. Um, Kestrel has the applied ballistics, and that's very, very useful. And it's funny, people are like, well, the Kestrel is great for close up, but when you're talking about doing a mile, how good is that Kestrel? Personally, I think it's amazingly good. It's going to help a lot, specifically in the identification. Um, Another way to read the wind is by looking at natural indicators, like we talked about. Watch how the leaves on the trees move, how grass bends, or even how smoke drifts if there's a fire nearby. I'm not going to say I'm going to light targets on fire, but yeah. Um, these indicators can tell us a lot about the direction, but but not necessarily the intensity of the wind, because different the heaviness of the branches, the different layers of grass, smoke can be easily modified even by a car going by. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting. So how do we translate what we see to an adjustment on the rifle? This is where the understanding of the wind's impact will come in. For every 10 miles per hour of wind speed, a bullet can be pushed off course by several inches, sometimes even feet, depending on the distance that we're shooting. The farther the distance, the more the bullet can be adjusted. To measure the wind speed accurately, there are many shooters use the handheld devices such as our Kestrel. But the goal isn't just to measure the wind where you are. You need to estimate along the entire bullet's path. And honestly, I kind of feel that it could be far more difficult for people in hotter areas. Like here in Florida, like I'm in Central Florida, the summer would be brutal. We have heat, but the moisture in the air would drastically affect it. Same in like Las Vegas or in the desert areas. Because the heat rising off the surface would also modify how the bullet reacts. I think in cooler directions, like late fall or early spring, here in Florida, where the temperature is very manageable and we're close to zero sea level, that gives us, in my personal opinion, but what the hell do I know? I'm still new at all of this, right? It would give us an opportunity to have our best possible shot. I mean, it sounds complicated, right? But with practice, you'll still start to develop a sense of these conditions. Like if I know how the flag moves, if I know how that specific grass moves. Many experienced shooters described it almost developing a sixth sense for the wind. Now, um, my our buddy to the show, Mike, who uh, got me out to 1,219 yards. His thing is the electronics help; they're useful, but if you can't read the wind without something battery operated, and that battery fails on the devices, you're not going to hit your target. So, Mike was helping me understand how the wind was happening every stage down upon the bullet's path. So let's wrap up this part. Mastering wind reading is about combining science with your instinct. By using tools like wind flags, observing natural indicators, and understanding the physics of your ballistics, you can make an educated adjustment to your aim. And that's how we're going to try this. Whether it's successful or not, we have to take this in baby steps. Each little stage will make a significant difference. I do want to remind you that every podcast that we have, if you watch live, you'll have the opportunity to win prizes. And the more people watching the podcast live ups the value of the prizes. So if we get, so I would encourage you, if you enjoy our podcast, to come watch it live on the channel or on Facebook under Lupo Outdoors. If we get up to 10 people watching, you can actually win one of our patches. To do the Lupo Outdoors patch. We get 25 people watching, and you win a hat. The only thing you have to do is make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and our Instagram. And please follow our page on Facebook. Those are the only things you really need to do currently. And then you have to participate inside the podcast. That's asking questions, answering questions. And then for everyone who participates, I will do a little raffle at the end. And the winner will be announced right then and there, depending on if we have enough people watching currently. And what I'll do is I have them go to that Facebook page, go under the Lupo Outdoors, and message me, PM me, private message me your contact info, and I'll mail out your prize. And some of these prizes are going to get very, very big and very valuable. So I encourage you to watch every single week and participate. That would be wonderful. So let's go into like segment 2, the science of ballistics. All right, so we talked about how to read the wind to a degree, right? But let's get a little bit deeper into exactly the wind affects your bullet once it leaves the barrel. This is where the science of ballistics comes into play. So ballistics is ballistics is essentially the study of the dynamics of projectiles, and for a shooter, understanding external ballistics is key. So the part of ballistics deals with the behavior of the bullet in flight, especially how environmental factors like wind affects its path. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. There's a reason why they call it the king of 2 mile. I've seen these people with $20,000 rigs who shot thousands of rounds and can't hit the broadside of the barn there. So when a bullet is fired, it immediately begins to encounter air resistance instantaneously, right? And if there's wind, it will start to drift. The amount of the drift depends on the wind speed, the bullet speed, its weight, and its shape. We briefly touched upon that, but I want you to think about those words there. Bullet weight, shape, speed, all of this comes into the game based on how the wind is moving, right? Um, Gravity has your effect, right? The heavier the bullet, the more gravity wants to suck it back down to the earth. The lighter the bullet, not so much, but it's lighting the candle on both ends, man. It's you can't shoot a very light bullet at really super speeds because there's not enough mass to get behind it to get it there. If we were shooting in space, different story. But we're not. So taking all this into consideration, right? Wind, the amount of wind drift, bullet speed, the weight, and its shape. This is where ballistic calculators come into play. These tools can help shooters predict how much a bullet will drift in the different conditions. You input your bullet type, its velocity, the wind conditions, and the calculator gives you an adjustment to dial into your scope. That part sounds easy. Sure. Sounds super easy. But I mean, think about that. So with the ballistics calculator, and we will actually be doing like a whole series of how to set up like a Kestrel with your phone and the ballistics calculator in there. Um, it's not so much rocket science, but you do need to have an understanding. And one of the great things about Kestrel is that they actually have a huge list of uh, modern bullets that are in there. So the the ballistics of the bullet is already in there for you, and then all you have to do is input your speed. How do we know the speed? Chronograph, which means is that factory loads usually give you a speed, but you'll find that it often varies drastically on that speed on whether or not it's actually going to be effective, right? So, as I've stated numerous times, especially if you watch the show, when I'm talking about when I was reloading for my shotgun, my ballistic speed for my shot was always 1,200 feet per second. That's how I loaded it, and every time I checked it, I was as close to that as I could get. There's so many reasons for consistency and speed. This is one of them. I want to get I want to find out which bullet and what speed is going to be the most ballistically coefficient that the barrel likes, that the gun likes. So when it comes out of that barrel, I need consistency every single shot out there. The adjustment of the scope makes a difference too. A lot of YouTubers are talking about the fact that you zeroed your rifle in, and then you go out and shoot again, and you don't have your zero anymore, right? It's like, wow, I shot it, and I was hitting a sub MOA group, excuse me, at 100 yards. But now, at 100 yards, when I take it back out, I haven't shot it for 2 months. I'm aiming here, and it's over here, and it's much wider than a sub MOA. It's bigger than a single MOA. Why does that happen? Well, like everything, everything's a tool, right? Your rifle is a tool, and you need to maintain that really, really well. And I'm not talking specifically cleaning. You got to make sure that your action screws are at the right torque. You got to make sure that the screws on the scope are at the right torque. You want as little play or movement as possible from every aspect of that rifle for your accuracy. I did a video, and I'm going to be doing another video as I install other Picatinny rails on different rifles. But I talked about installing a Picatinny rail, a full-size rail, on a Benelli Lupo. Yeah, I love the Benelli Lupo. Aside from the fact that it has my name, it's a really good shooting rifle. The primary Lupo is designed more for hunting. The HPR that's coming out currently it's convertible. You can convert it from hunting to a long range competition rifle, and we're going to put that to the test. But if any aspect of that rifle isn't at the condition it needs to be, is it properly oiled, right? Are the screws all set? When I was talking about the Picatinny rail on the Benelli Lupo, I said to use the red Loctite, the gunsmith's Loctite thread, and I had people push back. Well, you shouldn't use red; it's going to be permanent, and you should use blue if you're going to use any of it. I get that thought process, I really do, but here's the aspect here. You are normally not going to be removing the Picatinny rail off your rifle. That's just not something that's normally going to happen. If I need to remove that Picatinny rail, I can use the soldering iron to heat up the screw, and that will break apart the Loctite, and I'm able to remove it. It's a nice little trick. I'll be able just heat it up with a blowtorch. I ain't putting a blowtorch over the rifle. But a little soldering iron, just a few seconds. 1, 2, 3, and you should be able to break that Loctite to be able to remove the screw. So when we're looking at the whole ballistics calculator, I mean, it's a fascinating blend of physics and precision. By understanding these principles, shooters can adjust their aim to compensate for wind drift, elevation, and even the Earth's rotation in some extreme long range shots, right? But you also have to take the biometric pressure into consideration, sea level, everything. One of the things that we were talking about, me and Mike, is I can have a really good load for my rifle at like 1,200 feet elevation, but that load may not work really well near sea level. It'll work, but not at the level it was designed and tested for. All right, so let's talk about our next segment, the tools of the trade. What tools do we want to talk about to help us figure out everything that's going on out there. We've already talked a little bit about tools, but we're going to get into more. As precision shooters, our best friend can be the technology we use. And one of the most sophisticated tools is our Kestrel 5700X. This is the elite. And really, the biggest difference between the X and just the standard 5700 Elite is that the electronics in here are far faster. So you have calculations helping coming up significantly faster than the standard 5700. And why is that important? Well, if you're hunting, it's extremely important because that the animal that you're going after wants to move. And if it starts moving and you don't have your calculations, you may not hit the target. But in competition, where things are timed, you want that number to come up as quickly as it possibly can so you can dial in and adjust. And then also, when you're looking at things like reticles, make sure that you have holdovers on your reticles. So it's sometimes instead of adjusting, what a lot of shooters will do is they know at the different ranges in the holdovers, the Christmas tree reticles, they can count out as a specific branch, and they know that's their holdover right there. And what they'll do is they'll just bring that right where they want that bullet to land and pull the trigger. So when we were talking about the Kestrel 5700, it's just not like just any other gadget out there. It's designed specifically to provide all the environmental data you need to make those critical shooting decisions, from wind speed and direction to air pressure and humidity. This thing measures it all. It's for something so small, this is so incredibly powerful. I'm just so amazed by how this is designed. Because realistically, you would expect something much larger, and this can fit in your pants pocket, and it's built like a bloody tank. We will be doing a full review on the Kestrel, and just for the sake, I just wanted to thank Kestrel again. Thank you very much for sending out everything that you did. It will be well used, and we can't wait to go through the instruction. We're going to be filming like instructional videos throughout this whole process for everybody. So let's talk about this a little bit. So here's how you use it. First, you need to set it up on the tripod. Actually, the first thing you need, now they tell you in their videos, you will do a not a calculation, but I'm going to kind of set it so it understands the magnetic north. And you'll set it up here in settings. We'll go through an actual video, but for about a minute or so, you'll slowly rotate it away from metals in your hands. Now, what I do is I set it up on the tripod, which is mostly carbon fiber and so forth, and I'll calibrate it. That was the word I was looking for. I'll calibrate it on the tripod, and it's just a slow rotation level. And then once it knows that, I'll make sure it's on the tripod. and near my shooting positions. Now, this version allows me to set the strength of the Bluetooth, and I can also isolate the Bluetooth via a pin and an identifier. So if there's multiple people out there shooting, I don't have to worry about this um, interfering or changing my data with somebody else's data. I mean, they really figured this out. But you can also do the strength of the Bluetooth. So if I want this a little bit further away or offside downrange a little bit, I can still gather that data into the HUD. Bravo, Kestrel, you did a great job on this. Uh, uh, what's nice about this is it does update in real time. It allows you to monitor changes as they happen, which is why that HUD aspect is really, really important. So, and then I can take this data through the ballistics calculator that's built in, um, and it'll give me a firing solution, right? So when you see the old movies and they're like, going, get a fire solution, and they use the radar and the trucks, and they'll figure out the elevation and how much powder to use. Kind of the same thing to a degree, not as elaborate. Um, and that will help with the current conditions. But then we go back to the fact that this Kestrel is near me. And when we talk about a mile, we have to deal with everything that's out there. So I can get all the data except for the wind along the path. I can get the wind that's near me, and that'll give me a base idea. But I need the wind throughout the whole path. But it's tools like this that help remove guesswork from long range shooting, making the attempts more accurate and consistent. Now, do we just rely on tools? Like Mike said, he relies on everything that's around him. Because if it doesn't need a battery, why should I use it? And I agree with that to a degree, right? To a point. If you're not going to be using a battery operated device, what's the problem then, right? So let's kind of just wrap all this together into our next segment here, right? Let's discuss preparing for the executing a mile shot. So in this segment, we're going to talk about practical applications. We've covered a lot today so far, but let's put it into a perspective with a potential scenario. Setting up for that mile-long shot. All right, so let's imagine that we're in the field. We've got the rifle, like maybe my Barrett 338 Lapua. I've got the Kestrel 5700X set up, and I know the wind conditions because I've set my expectations out there. I've looked through the spotting scope, and at the different stages down there, I'm able to identify what's going on with the wind, right? The target is a mile away. First, I need to find a stable shooting position, and then I need to set up the equipment. Now, have you ever wondered why the majority of long-range shooter shoot prone, down on the ground? It alleviates so much of your body's movement. It's ridiculous. If I'm on the bench, I'm still dealing with body movement, any adjustments, and so forth. If I'm prone and I have my bipod set up, that's another thing we'll go into details. It's like, what's the best bipod for long range shooting? And yes, there's actually an answer to that. One of the aspects that we need to identify is the fact that when we look at everything down the path, everything has a job to do. Everything has to be there to help stabilize the rifle to fire a projectile a mile accurately, right? Um, so prone is your best, use the key phrase here, shot for accuracy, right? Less possible, movement with the most possible body contact on the rifle. um, Next, we'll have to dial the firing solution, right? And provided by all the different tools we have, whether it's wind flags, whether the Kestrel, the instinct, the training, the grass, the mirage that we see, every aspect is going to give us um, that information that's going to help us with that firing solution. Remember, at this range, even a half minute of angle adjustment can be the difference between a hit and a miss. That's not a lot, right? Breathing, focus, and then when we're ready, we take the shot. I didn't realize how much breathing had to do with this until I was out there. When you're connected with the rifle, you can actually see the reticle moving. If you're not a long range shooter, this is going to sound ridiculous to you, but you're all keyed up here. You have your finger on the trigger. And as you breathe, you can see the reticle move. What I want to do is I want to adjust it. So on my exhale, I can hold the exhale for a fraction of a second and gently, very gently, pull the trigger. Hold that trigger for a half a second before release. Got to do that follow through. Shotgun shooting, every aspect of it. You don't jerk the trigger, which seemed to be a problem with me when I was shooting out in Oregon with everybody. I don't do that with shotguns, and I wasn't understanding why I was doing it with rifles, but we got it under control. But I was seeing movements on the reticle with my heartbeat. This is all very, very disconcerting. It's kind of crazy. My competition 6.5 I'm sorry, 6.5 Creedmoor rifle that I have has barrels that big. We've talked about it in the past. And I have a mock Genesis scope on there, 6x60. That's pretty amazing. And that gets me really, really close to the target. So I can really see my impacts. But there's other ways, like Caldwell, by the way, and we talked about it at SHOT Show. They have these shot indicators, and they're very, very inexpensive. And you can Velcro them on the back of steel targets, and you can see that flash, the LED flash, about a mile. So we might be actually using some of those when we attempt the shots, or at least during, for the training that we do. So we're hoping to get some of those soon to evaluate. So we're going to do breathe, hyper focus, and take that shot. Got to remember that long range shooting is as much about patience and practice as it is about precision and calculations. You're not going to hit a mile if you haven't put rounds through your rifle. And people don't understand that. Like, well, the ammo is expensive. I'm like, of course the ammo is expensive, especially for the larger calibers. You start shooting things like, 50 BMG, and you're talking about $10 a round. Um, but if you don't know your rifle, you're not going to hit anything. You got to understand the quirks about your rifle. You got to understand how it operates in different heats and weather conditions. Um, it's like your car. So let's say we're doing the Indianapolis 500, and I want to get a good pull. Excuse me, a good pull position. If I jump into a car I've never driven before, and I try to get a really good pull position, that's probably not going to happen because you need to understand that car. It's the same thing with shooting. You need to understand that rifle. You need to understand how that rifle operates, how it shoots, how that trigger reacts. There's so much to this. It's kind of mind-boggling. But I mean, realistically, when we come down to it, um, there we have it. Whether we hit or miss, um, each shot that you take on that rifle is a learning experience. Um, we need to keep practicing. We need to keep shooting and studying the wind, and then keep refining and redefining our techniques. Um, every inch of this is a learning practice. And then my question with a lot of this is, and one of the reasons why we have the multiple calibers is, do the super expensive rifles make a difference over the more cost-effective rifles and how those are put together? And that's a big question. So can I build? I mean, Browning had the Howa 1500 long action, 300 PRC barrel and action at a really good price. So I bought one, and then I'm going to buy the Lupo HPR and 300 PRC. And what I want to do is like my budget build 300 PRC. Will that match up against my superior factory purchased? So I mean the Lupo HPR is designed for long range shooting specifically and long range hunting. So am I going to get the same quality on a rifle that's over $2,000 compared to a budget build that's going to be under $1,000? And that's going to be the question. So as we do this journey, which is going to include annealing, oh my God, the annealing part's already driving me crazy. But I can't wait to show you everything that we're discovering. The annealing, the reloading, the training on the applied ballistics, and the teaching classes that we're going to put together on this Kestrel, and how we're going to be using the scopes, and to the different scopes make a difference, and how do we make sure everything's all put together and defined. This is going to be a long, fun journey, and I'm happy that you're going to be joining us as we go through this. So we're at the top of the hour right now. I want to remind you, if you are not subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. We put up shorts every day talking about hunting and fishing. And then the videos that are coming out this year are going to be very exciting and very educational. I want to remind you to start watching these podcasts live. We will be giving away some cool prizes. Um, and I've talked to some annealers, so we might actually be giving away some brand new annealers too, and other products. Uh, it's going to be fun. Next week, we're going to continue talking about the journey, and what is involved in the preparation. We will have more guests coming up on the show. I just got confirmation from Falco Holsters that my friend over there said he would join our podcast. So as we get more information about that, I will let you know. That would be very, very exciting. If you're not familiar with Falco Holsters, oh my God, check them out. Probably the best made firearm holsters I've ever seen, ever. I mean, they're really top notch. He did send me one, and we have a video up on it where my camera crapped out on me a little bit. But we have a new camera that actually mounts on your bicycle. And he sent me out the other version of that that fits on a bicycle. So it looks like a normal pouch, but it helps do a concealed carry while you're bike riding. And the whole story of how that happened was quite fascinating because the owner was out riding a bike, and if you fall off your bike, which is usually at high speed, and you fall on your concealed carry, that's going to hurt a lot. It could potentially really injure you. Where if your concealed carry is at an easy to reach location on your bike, problem solved. So I'll have him on fairly soon, and that should be an absolute great show. So make sure that you follow us there. Thank you again very, very much for watching our podcast. Start watching live, and we're going to start having raffles and giveaways live on the podcast. So please join us for that. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel and our Instagram. And if you have questions or suggestions, go to Facebook. Go to Lupo Outdoors on Facebook and feel free to chat with us. And if you have something cool and you want to be on the show, let us know. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again next week.